Laura. My name is Maurice Fallon. I'm an academic in Oxford Robotics Institute, which is one of the partners in the RAIN Hub. And today I'm going to speak about a project that we've been working on in collaboration with Createc. And so the project has been developing a smart radiation mapping system, and it's an Innovate UK project, but it started off with some seed funding from the RAIN Hub. So obviously nuclear robotics is quite hard to get going in, and we're really appreciative of RAIN for giving us initial funding to get the collaboration going, which led to the Innovate UK follow-on funding. And we have 3 presentations and a demo to give today. So we'll start off with overviewing the work we've done to develop autonomous exploration in unknown environments. And then we'll hand over to people in Createc in Cumbria. So Matt and Michael will demonstrate how we've integrated radiation mapping into that, and we'll finish with a demo. So we've worked with multiple platforms in the project. Most of the work was done with a legged system on the right-hand side, the Animal, but we'll demonstrate with the Jackal in the center/left, the yellow robot. Okay, so first I'll talk about it from the context of autonomous exploration entirely without reference to nuclear radiation. And from my perspective, the state of the art is the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. So this is a multi-year kind of robotic treasure hunt in which a variety of teams around the world are competing to develop autonomous exploration systems to allow teams of robots to start with no prior information and explore unknown facilities. So that's been tested in a multiple different test locations. So an underground mine. This is a mothballed nuclear facility in Washington State in the US, where the most recent competition was held in February of last year, just before everything changed. And you can see in the bottom right some of the maps that were created by our team competing in the competition. Each color indicates a different robot that was exploring simultaneously over the course of 1 hour. The kind of idea is that the robots start at this doorway here, teams of robots, and they have to build maps and report back different kind of treasure that they detect. So mannequins or notable things like backpacks or mobile phones that might be detected through their Wi-Fi. And this is what the state-of-the-art of mobile autonomous robots kind of exploring in unknown environments looks like. So the Spot robot here has been adapted by JPL, part of NASA, and we've been working with the Animal, and kind of the characteristics of those and other platforms like wheel platforms, which have been used by other teams, are having a variety of omnidirectional LiDAR and depth cameras around the robot. So you can see in both of the platforms here, there are a multitude of cameras and LiDARs that are creating 3D reconstructions all the way around the robot, supporting different types of odometry, so things like thermal cameras, because part of the challenge is in smoky environments. And that's kind of come about because, you know, with all of this extra kit that you can see on top of the robot, the Spot robot here, there are multiple i7 CPUs on board. So there's a lot of capability being pushed forward in this competition, and these are kind of the scenario that you can see. So smoky environments, muddy, dirty mines. Here in the front, you can see one of the robots that went out first and fell over from our team, and then the second one is following through. And it's all controlled by a single operator. Now, I won't go into great detail. This is the team that we're involved in, but we're focusing on a combination of aerial and legged systems. And just some of the mobility aspects that are being pushed forward in here are obviously things like stair climbing, traversal of muddy ground, but also communications, which is a major aspect. The first time you go around a concrete wall, then your communications drops out. So we're developing droppable wireless antennas so that we can extend communications into the facility so the operator can see what's going on and direct the robot. Today I'll talk mostly about 3D mapping, which is kind of the core technology to give the robot situational awareness and then to enable exploration planning. As I mentioned, the robots have a variety of different odometry sources on board. So on top you can see here a series of fisheye cameras, so that they're able to give us a kind of visual odometry. laser obviously, and legodometry. And the primary piece of work that we've done and contributed to this competition, but also developed and integrated for the project, the radiation project, has been fusing all of these different sources of odometry. So here is our laser mapping system. So this is a handheld variant that we had in place about a year ago for a data set that we collected. And you can see the laser being used to incrementally estimate the motion of the handheld system. And this gives a very low drift and high accuracy odometry system if you're moving reasonably slowly. But when you're moving very quickly, then there's a lot of little features that need to be corrected because the sensors are not instantaneous. They're continuously scanning. So, and then moving on to vision, well, it's a much more well-known sensor modality. A pair of stereoscopic cameras approximating the separation of the eye, tracking visual point features in the scene, as you can see in this video from a well-known data set, and tracking those visual features over time. And this modality obviously fails if you were to walk up to a blank wall, which autonomous robots tend to do, and or you're to operate in a dark environment or where there's smoke, for example. And then we have the legodometry from the walking robot. Here, this is on the right-hand side, indicates the walking robot walking, and then every time you see a new green dot, it corresponds to a foothold, and that gives us a constraint that allows us to estimate just based off of the onboard leg sensing. And wheeled robots, you would have wheel odometry. This source of odometry continuously drifts, and really it depends on the type of terrain you're working on. So on the left-hand side, you can see some muddy ground in an old mine that we've used for testing. And what we've seen from this drive to combine all of these different odometry systems. So these are 4 different odometry systems from papers written by teams that competed in the competition, and they all have these blocks that I've indicated in red. They're effectively very highfalutin odometry switches. So you've got maybe multiple odometries, and you've got a multiplexer, which is basically a lot of hand-engineered code to switch between different sources. This is from an earlier version of our own team's work. So you've got vision, thermal, LiDAR, and then you've got health evaluation, effectively a switch, and this one's a bit more explicit. It actually has if statements in the figure. So what we've been doing and testing as part of the 2 projects that I've mentioned is a system that allows you to fuse LiDAR and visual features in a single optimization framework. So from the LiDAR, we might extract these red edges. These are lines in the LiDAR, so maybe a door jamb, for example, and this green patch corresponds to a planar patch, a small flat patch detected from the LiDAR. These yellow dots correspond to visual features, corners or edges, and that's what you see here on the bottom right. So it forms itself into a single large-scale optimization problem, and the benefit of this approach is that if you were to enter an environment where there are few visual features, there will be few of these green lines that you see on the top, but you'll naturally end up with some LiDAR constraints, unless you're in an absolutely terrible environment, but then you might have your legodometry to provide this orange basis here at the middle through incorporation of IMU. So the point is that we've been working to develop a kind of odometry that can overcome very extreme sort of lighting changes and structure changes. So here you can see it's a very harsh visual lighting situation. We're pointing the camera directly towards the sun, and as we come underneath this bush, you can see that the exposure in the camera changes dramatically. The yellow dots, which are the visual features that are being tracked, drop out. You can see the cameras, oh, I'm getting that right, am I? The camera comes completely overexposed. All the yellow dots have dropped out now, but we naturally fall back to tracking the LiDAR planes and patches that you can see here. So here you see a green patch on one of the walls, and then you see some vertical edges which correspond to edges on window frames and door jambs, for example. And that gives us robustness to a lot of dynamic motion if the video is coming through. And here you can see some sort of more aggressive motion. So this is our handheld system being aggressively shaken, despite that, we're able to fuse all of the sensor measurements. And then taking it back to the application domain, this is the entirely unlit room where the only lighting is onboard lighting from the Animal robot, fusing together these different sources. And here you can see what that looks like. So the yellow dots, again, are the visual features that you can see both in the image and in 3D space. The green patches correspond to flat patches. It's actually flat patches on the side of the cooling tower of the test location, and the red edges correspond to vertical structure that you see in the environment. And you can see that the very consistent odometry that's being estimated. So we've been developing this through 3 different iterations, making it kind of more advanced as we've gone from something pretty crude on the left-hand side. We've integrated a PC in the last early in the year, and then we have this new model that we're putting together that has multiple wide-angle fisheye cameras, so that we can use more vision in some of the degenerate scenarios. And we've also worked on deploying it and integrating it within robots, which will be the kind of the focus for the remainder of the talk. So this modular navigation system you can see has been deployed on multiple robots, including this Spot robot that we've had on loan from Maurice through the end of scheme recently. So the last thing I'll say before handing over to my colleague Benoit is that so what we have with what I've talked about so far is a local mapping system that works in 3D in difficult lighting conditions. As you can see, our entirely dark test facility that we have used, it's about an hour from Oxford. Here is the local representation that we're able to build when we've fused all of these different sources together. So we've got a terrain map that effectively summarizes the local obstacles that are in the vicinity of the robot, and Benoit will talk about how we turn that into how we make decisions to move in that space. But you can see this is a kind of a 2.5D representation. It's kind of a carpet or mat around the robot, where red is high and blue effectively is flat or lower, and those are the spaces where the robot will plan. That's enabled by, for example, depth cameras pointing in all directions on the robot, as I've indicated on the left-hand side here, but also some of the more modern wide-angle lidars have much larger field of view, so you can actually use those as a single sensor by themselves. So at this stage, I'm gonna hand over to my colleague Benoit Cassio. Benoit, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you want to take the screen? Okay, I can see that.
Right. So good morning. So my name is Benoit Cassot. I'm a software engineer at the Oxford Robotics Institute. And today I will present you the planner that we developed during this project. So we call this planner the Terrain Explorer, and it's a planner that can explore an arbitrary space without any prior information. So the planner works by performing a frontier search on the elevation map. So everything that is outside the map is labeled as unknown. Everything that is inside the map is labeled unknown. And so you have to know that the elevation map is a 2D grid that is divided into cells, and each cell has is a 8 by 8 centimeters square. And so if a cell is adjacent to a known and at the same time to an unknown space, it's called a frontier cell. So effectively, all the frontier cells are located on the borders of the map. And we also reject all the frontier cells that are near untraversable obstacles, because we can use the elevation map to classify the terrain into traversable and untraversable space by using the slope of the terrain. So then we end up with a collection of frontier cells, and we just need to pick up what we call frontier points to so in the picture below you can see the frontier points in yellow. It's the yellow and the red balls. And then we just pick up one of the frontier points as a goal for the robot. So then the robot just needs to reach a frontier point to explore more space. And we use the RT planner to reach a frontier point. So you can see on the picture below that all the frontier points are located on the borders of the map. And when the robot reaches a frontier point, it will relaunch a frontier search. So, yeah. Yes. So the elevation map is a local map that is centered around the robot. So it means that when the robot moves, the elevation map moves with the robot. So we need to keep an history of where the robot has been if we want to avoid going back to areas that were already explored before. So in order to do that, we take advantage to the SLAB system that was presented before by Maurice. And we use this SLAM system to to build a data structure that we call a navigation graph. And so the nodes of this graph are all the past position of the robot. So every time a frontier search is detected, multiple frontier points are found. And of course, the robot can only reach one frontier point at a time. So we store all the remaining frontiers in the navigation graph, and they will be explored later. And later, the robot will use the past trajectory. So you can see the trajectory taken by the robot on the picture. It's the yellow line. And yeah, and the robot will use this past trajectory as a highway to quickly and easily reach the frontiers, the remaining frontiers. And we also use this SLAM trajectory to reject frontiers that are too close to a past position of the robot. And so it's only when the navigation graph is empty, and when it doesn't contain any more frontiers, that we say that the exploration is over. And in this case, the robot will go back to the starting position. So moving on, so now I will show you how we tested the planner during field trials. So we went to a place near Oxford that was a former underground mine that was converted into a bunker during the Cold War. So this place is made of very large rooms. So you can see one of them on the left. So I think the size of this room is 30 by 30. It's roughly 30 by 30 meters. And so we let our robots explore them. So it's a very challenging place because it's almost completely unlit. It's made of rough terrain, on uneven terrain, and the ground is also most slippery. So now I will show you the two robots that we brought to this place. So Maurice already talked about the animal scene. So it's a Leggett robot. It's a 45-kilogram Leggett robot. So it has one LiDAR on the top that we use to build our SLAM map. It also has 4 depth cameras, 2 on the sides and 1 on the front and 1 on the back. So I will show you a video of Animal C exploring the room. Right. It was to give you an idea of how Animal C can move. So And the other robot that we used is a Ross Robotics Extreme. So it's a wheeled robot that we also fitted with a rooster. And so because all our software runs on a rooster, it can be very easily integrated on any robots. And so far in this project, we have integrated our system. So by our system, I mean our SLAM system and the planner on 3 different robots. And all our, yes, so the planner, VLANs and RT runs on the rooster. So again, I will show you a quick video of the Extreme robot exploring a room in Corsham. Sorry. Right. So now, yeah. So this is the Extreme robot exploring a room in Corsham. So the frontiers are in yellow. The goal is the red ball. And we are using RT to reach the goals. So you can see the trajectory of the robot in green. It's the green path. So it's computed by our SLAM system. Here you can see that we are using the SLAM graph as a highway to quickly reach a node of the graph, and then to quickly reach a stored frontier. And you see that every time a frontier is reached, a new frontier search is launched. And yes, the exploration goes on like that. So our 2 robots, Animal C and Extreme, were able to explore most of the rooms in Corsham. So Corsham is the name of the underground mine. Yeah. So I will now move on. I also would like to mention a field trial that we did at the UK AEA Science Center in Culham. So during this experiment, we brought Extreme, and we fitted Extreme with a Createc microspec sensor. So the sensor is highlighted on the picture below with, and on this picture you can see Extreme.
Benoit, I think your presentation might have frozen.
What is frozen, sorry?
I think your presentation is still on the Corsham experiments.
Is it still the case?
Yeah. If you stop sharing and reshare.
Yeah. Is it better now?
It's a blank screen at the moment.
So I'm sharing my screen again.
No, it's a blank. It's just
sorry.
I can see if I can share mine and play the slides. Let me take over on the screen. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Why don't you continue?
Yes. Yes, so in this picture, you can see the Extreme robot exploring a drum store at the Science Center in Culham. And you can see highlighted in red, you can see the Createc microspec sensor. And so can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. So I would like to quickly mention some other features of the planner. So every time the communication between the base station and the robot is lost, the the planner can tell the robot to go back to a node where the communication with the base was possible. Every time when the exploration is over, the planner can also tell the robot to go back to the home position. Now I would like to talk about the future plan. So far we have only tested our planner on a single level facility, and we would like to extend that to multiple floors facilities. So, and we would like also to be able to autonomously climb stairs. So sorry, can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. So during the last 2 months, Race loaned us the Spot robot, and we used it to extend our SLAM system to multiple floors. So you can see it running on the right. So the robot started in the basement in our lab and is now climbing a staircase. So it's now exploring, it's not exploring, it was teleoperated, but it's now walking on the top floor. And you can see our SLAM system running live and mapping a multiple floor building. And so we like to extend our planner to be able to explore multiple floors, buildings. Yes, that's it. That's it for me. Do you have any questions?
Okay, we're gonna stop at this point, and if anybody on the call wants to ask some questions about the planning and exploration part before we switch over to the radiation point, feel free to ask them in the chat. Okay, so Laura says might not have time for questions after Oxford talks are running over time. Okay, I thought we were on time, but yeah, okay. At which point we'll leave questions until the very end. Matt, do you want to step in now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll just share my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
Great. Okay. So hi everyone, I'm Matt Mellor, CEO of Createc. Createc does quite a lot of research into applications of robotics and sensing in the field of nuclear. Also going to be supported on this presentation by my colleague Michael Friedman, who's going to actually run the demo for you when I've finished talking. Can I advance? Oh, good. I thought I had Benoit's problem for a moment there. The specific application that we're interested in with this project is autonomous radiation mapping. It's an area that's been being developed and starting to develop increasing traction over the last few years. Createc's done a few projects such as the RISER project, where working in conjunction with a company called Blue Bear, we developed and flew an autonomous radiation mapping drone at Fukushima for a few months. We have a handheld SLAM product that tries to sort of automate the data management for a human surveyor. And we've done various things with wheeled robot systems, as have numerous other groups around the world. This is an area where the UK has actually got quite a strong track record. We've done a relatively large amount of this stuff, and quite a lot of the research groups working in this area are in this place, and we're starting to see the advantages of that. The advantages that have been focused on are really to do with the trying to keep people away from radiation thing. But actually, while that's good and necessary, we think that people have underestimated the potential third benefit of this, which is that robots, because they have the ability to crunch the data in real time and to do physics analysis that the human brain's just not capable of, are actually capable of doing a much better job than a human. And we think that that's an underexplored area. So the capability has been proven, the value has been proven, but we're not seeing a lot of it happening in practice. And we think there's a few reasons for that. The main reason is that these things are typically deep integrated in the sense that you have a specific robot, a specific navigation system, a specific autonomy package, a specific detector, and a specific purpose for the robot, and you combine all of that together to make a single purpose system that now has quite a narrow focus, and the development cost of that is quite high. So if you then start looking at other applications, you're almost back to the drawing board again with let's write a whole new system. So that's one of the key problems that we see. Another problem is that people who are used to doing things in a manual way find it quite hard to understand how they can, how they can satisfy themselves that these robots are doing the right thing and that they're getting the analysis and the data handling correct. So you've got generally quite a long and expensive piece of work to do every time you finish the robot just to get your end user to accept the output. So the less we have to repeat that, the better. And finally, most of the applications have focused on working the way that people work. So because people don't have the capability to crunch the data in real time, they kind of follow a recipe or a map to go and get data in certain places using certain instruments, and then there's an offline task to process that. The advantage of doing it online is that we can actively manage the quality objectives for the survey while we're getting the data in response to what we're seeing. So very much like the exploration work that Benoit just showed us, where the robot is responding to the data that comes from the navigation sensors, we can also respond to the data that comes from the radiation sensor in order to meet some specific survey requirement as efficiently or as thoroughly as possible. So what we've tried to do in this specific project is to make a subsystem, a reusable subsystem that is packaged, a detector with some autonomy that converts the very specific data and the subjective data that comes out of that specific detector into something which is objective and sufficiently abstract that a robot can deal with it without needing to know precisely how that specific sensor was used to produce that specific result. What that means is that someone who doesn't necessarily understand how radiation measurement works can still take this system and integrate it with their robot to get some specific task complete, and they can be sure, and their end user can be sure, that the computations behind that are robust and that the robot is achieving its specific quality objective, rather than simply going and getting some data which may or may not turn out to be sufficient when we analyze it. The structure that we've adopted assumes that the radiation module, the smart radiation module, is developed by a team who really know nothing about the robot, and that the robot system is being integrated by a team who really know nothing about radiation measurement, which, if we're going to scale this up as an industry, that's probably how it's going to work in reality. So we envisage a situation like this, where the two left-hand modules are what comprise the smart radiation system. So you have, first of all, the detector, which may be one of a whole bunch of different types of detector. And then you have always the same smart module that connects to that, and knowing what it is, interprets its outputs into objective measures of the environment, which can then be shared with the robot controller, so that the robot controller can then respond to that to fulfill its mission, whatever it may be. And we also recognize that in order to interpret radiation data, you need to know things about the environment. And typically the robot already knows those things. So it already knows something about where the floor is, where the walls are, where the objects are. It knows how it's moving. So those are precisely the things that we need to know to interpret the radiation data. So we envisage a dialogue between these two abstract actors, if you like, at an almost sort of human comprehensible level. And they exchange information between the two things without needing to know exactly what either side of the system is doing with that data. So it becomes an autonomous collaboration between two loosely connected subsystems. So our approach to this has been to repackage our Recon handheld system. We've removed the human interface components. We've replaced those with a ROS interface or an Iris interface, which is our own modular system for robotics. And we split the system into 3 chunks. So we've got a ruggedized detector that has it's sealed, it's thermally managed, it's protected from knocks and bumps, and it has a standardized port for connecting to module 2, which is basically just a computer running the code, exposing a ROS interface. And optionally, should we be integrating with a system that doesn't have 3D capability, we have got a kind of a low-res 3D sensor module that can be bolted on as well to provide that information if it's required. But we typically assume that the robot system will be able to just provide map information through the standardized interface. Now, the main thing that this module is doing is it's converting the input data, which is typically a list of numbers that describe either average radiation intensities or observations of specific gamma photons. And it's combining that information with the location of the sensor at the time those observations were taken, and the perception of the shape of the world around it, and physics information to understand where did that radiation come from, what was the intensity of the source that it originated from, and physically where is that source in the environment. One of the main things that we did in this project, as well as the repackaging and the introducing the automation interface, was to drop one level down in the way that we were handling that data, so that we're now working on an individual photon basis. And that enables us to accommodate a new type of radiation sensor, which is what's called a Compton imager. A Compton imager makes observations of the specific way that gamma radiation photons interact with the solid matter in the detector, such that they can infer that the photon must have originated on the surface of some kind of cone. Now that cone will be somewhat random for each observation that we make, but the true orientation will always lie somewhere within that cone. To be able to produce the radiation map, we just need to do some kind of statistical maths on those set of cones from many events to deduce the true location, or even to make a full image. By doing this in a generic single photon structure where we have an arbitrary definition of the probability of different orientations, which is what the envisaged stack enables, we're able to produce one code that can both produce Compton images, but it can also produce images from sophisticated collimators that introduce different probability patterns. We can also do things like we can remove the self-shielding effect of the robot and even make that useful information. And because each photon is treated individually, we can allow the sensor to be in continuous motion. And because we have a map, instead of just projecting onto a flat surface, we can be reconstructing an image on our complex 3D world. So this provides a completely generic way to build up 3-dimensional images from almost arbitrary combinations of different types of sensors and collimators. And that process is completely automated. The only thing you've got to tell it is what detector has it got, and if you've got a collimator, what collimator is that, and where have you connected it to the detector, and it will handle everything else for you. The detectors that we've looked at in this project are kind of arbitrary, but we've selected simple CZT detectors, which are small, light, have pretty good performance and are very suitable for integration with small robots or for use in high radiation environments. And we've integrated this yellow Compton camera, which has a very, very high sensitivity, very high resolution, and is a good fit to the most demanding environmental and waste assessment applications. And then kind of in the middle, still under development, we've integrated this sensor on the right, which is the M400 from H3D, which kind of sits between the two. It has a lower volume than the CZT detector. In fact, it itself is a CZT detector, but it's a larger volume. It does have Compton capability, also has fairly good resolution. It kind of sits between the two in terms of accuracy and sensitivity. But relative to the PHDS, it's actually quite a lot smaller and lighter, and typically more suitable for harsh environments. So this video is an example of how this looks in practice. We've got up here a robot. You can see on the left is a ClearPath Husky. You can't quite see it at the moment, but on the far side of the yellow detector is the ORI Rooster payload that's been doing mapping using the VLens algorithm that Maurice described. And then that system is communicating with the smart radiation system, just sending periodic map update messages and a stream of location data. The smart radiation data system is integrating that with the individual photon observations from the yellow GG detector to work out what's going on in the environment. And just in the sort of the center right of the image, you can see a kind of what looks like a lead ball with a retort stand sticking out of it, and that's holding a small radiation source. So this is a pretty small source, pretty difficult to see. As the system starts to move on the right, we get introspection into what's going on inside the smart radiation package. So that sends out a map update message every few seconds, and you can see you can just about make out there's some sort of arcs and streaks. So each one of those corresponds to a single photon that's been observed. So we're seeing, just a handful of photons here. The system's in continuous motion, so each photon is being seen from a different location, and yet we're autonomously able to fuse all of that data together and work out where that source is. So you can see that that green blob just turned purple actually as it's become more certain of it. That's starting to develop in the correct location for where that source is. Now this source is really tiny, so to be able to accurately pin that down to within a few centimeters, within a few tens of seconds from an instrument that's in constant motion, that's a really tough challenge. And yet effectively what's happened here is that the ORI team are able to put this together without really knowing anything about radiation detection at all, just simply pick up the most sensitive detector, bolt it on, and the rest is almost completely automatic. There are some really interesting things that potentially can happen when we start to work in this way. I'm not going to say too much about them because we are getting a bit pressed for time. But I think one of the things which is really interesting is what happens when we start to make a radiation measurement quality objective be a part of the robot exploration plan. So a typical case we might have at the moment would be something like, let's say on the top left, this image here represents a robot following a red path, and it has a detector of a certain sensitivity which manages to find everything in the green zone. And let's say that covering at least this amount of area is the search objective. If we then remove that detector and put in a less sensitive detector, while we're following the to-do list approach to robotics where we just follow predetermined paths, when we follow that path, we're now going to fail our quality objective because this detector is not going to be able to cover enough of the area with this path. And the only way to fix that would be for somebody to go manually back into the robot and reconfigure this new variant to do a new path on a case-by-case basis. On the other hand, if the robot is actively managing this quality objective of trying to turn a certain proportion of the map green, it will realize for itself that this new efficient detector is requiring it to work harder, and it will automatically adapt through its exploration algorithm to a new path, which will give it the density that we're looking for. So by changing the detector, we don't change the quality of the output, we just change what the robot does. And it takes longer, or it takes less time, or it's able to work in a different way. But that will manifest itself automatically simply by unplugging one detector and plugging in a new detector. So there's some really quite interesting things that can arise from this approach. For the last few minutes, we're going to move on to doing a live demo. As Maurice said at the beginning, the live demo is going to be using this system. So we've got the Rooster payload running VLens at the front. That's doing the positioning and the search. We've got the smart radiation sensor mounted high up, so it's not only measuring the piece of floor immediately under the Jackal robot. And essentially what you're going to see is that is going to be, it's going to wake up with no idea where it is, but it's going to have a clear mission, which is to do frontier exploration using Benoit's code, mapping radiation as it goes, and it's just going to wake up, find its way around Createc's warehouse, and hopefully locate a radiation source autonomously while it's doing that. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Michael and Rachel if you're ready.
Yeah. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So hello, this is me on Rachel's feed. So we're here in the Createc warehouse in Cockermouth. So if you'd like to sort of show them the warehouse, it's you know not the most representative environment, but it is what we have with the pandemic. And we have, I think Rachel is, I think in the field of view of the camera, you're just off the left. Can you show them where the source is? So down this corridor, there's that, there's a cesium source. It's a pretty weak cesium source. So this is the type of, so with the weak cesium source, which the Jackal can only really see when it's reasonably close to it, what we would really benefit, the only real way to reliably find it is a dense, very dense search. But because this is a live demo and a dense search could take quite a long time, we've opted for just a sort of general point cloud, a sort of shorter version where it just optimizes for map quality. But while optimizing for map quality, you're guaranteed to go down the corridor at some stage. So it's pretty much guaranteed to find it. What isn't necessarily guaranteed to find is it in any reasonable amount of time. So sometimes the run will take 2 minutes, sometimes the run will take 10 minutes or 15 minutes before it decides that it's satisfied, because it's not entirely deterministic. You know, slight changes in the point cloud map at the beginning could result in various different paths. So I'm going to let it run for a few minutes, and then if it hasn't found the source yet, we have a pre-prepared video to play. Also, if you look off to the right, there is another area of the warehouse off to the right, but we've fenced it off with cones just so that the Jackal doesn't waste time exploring down there. So I think that I'm ready to start it off, if that's all right. So we'll kick it off, show you, you can see the video of it exploring for a while, and then I'll share my screen and you can see the actual output of the planner and the radiation mapping. So let me get it going. All right, so I'm going to set it off on its exploration now. All right, and now that you've seen it move around for a bit, I think I'll share my screen so that you can see see what I'm seeing. So if you can see my screen now, what we have in this corner over here is the on video from the RealSense, which is an onboard camera on the Jackal. What we have in these two graphs, on the right, we have everything to do with the planner, and on the left, we have everything to do with the radiation mapping. So both of these are 3D maps. So you can see, for example, this is the Jackal's current location in both of them. This is the radiation map. So it's the voxelized reconstruction of radioactivity. Each voxel represents, I think, 100 square millimeter area. And it is actually now going down. So this is the corridor that I showed you before. This is the edge of that cage that I showed you before. And this color scale goes from blue to red, blue representing low radiation, red representing high radiation. So you can see just now, so I won't have to show you the pre-prepared video because it's done in record time. Just now it has gone past the source and accurately located it there, which is, you saw earlier, the actual location of the source. On the right, so here is just some background radiation that will probably fade away over time. On the right, you can see what Benoit was, a similar video to what Benoit was showing you with the, various explorations in the mines. So you have the elevation map, yellow spheres representing all the potential frontiers, red spheres representing its current goal, and the purple path represents its past path, with the green path representing its future path. And so you can see we've got quite a good radiation mapping going on, completed over here. I'll also show you something. Matt was talking about quality objectives. So one other thing that we have over here is an alternate field from the point cloud. And this is just showing areas that the Jackal has been within a certain, that the Jackal is determined to have explored within a reasonable, within a, there's a parameter that you can set depending on the sensitivity of the detector of what would count as explored to get a reasonable radiation reading. And this is this represents, green represents the areas that it has thresholded as explored, while red represents the areas that it hasn't. So this could be used to guide a sort of reasonably dense search of areas that are a reasonably dense radiation search will maximize coverage of the area by, for example, generating frontiers along the edge of the map that is marked as explored, and what the distance away that the Jackal would have to be from each point in the voxel map would just be changeable based on a simple parameter in the config map based on the sensitivity of the detector.
So what this one is specifically showing us on the left now is the area for which a predetermined minimum detectable activity would have been achieved. So basically, as long as we, in a clearance type application or a threat search application, if we've got this far and we haven't found anything yet, then we can say with confidence that there isn't anything any bigger than our target threshold in the green area. So this would be an application, could be if you have a decommissioned building that you believe to be free of radiation, and you're preparing to go through the very costly process of proving that formally, you can do a search like this to satisfy yourself that you haven't missed something which would cause you to very expensively abort that search. Or in a security context, if you wanted to clear shipping containers at a port, you'd do the same sort of minimum detectable activity threshold search.
So yeah, so it will continue. I'll stop sharing so that you can go see that, be satisfied that it is still moving around. So it will move around until it is satisfied that it's either explored all relevant frontiers, or that it can't, or it's eliminated, and it's explored all frontiers that it marks as traversable. But I think Oh, I think it is actually going home now. I can't see any frontiers left. Yeah, sorry, it is satisfied, so it's coming home, and that marks the end of its search. So it has marked this area as explored. Obviously, there is this entire area behind us, but it's correctly realized that it can't get there because we put all these cones in the way. Otherwise, the demo would be even longer. So yeah, I think that concludes the demo aspect of it, unless anyone else has any questions.
No, I think that's a good place to finish. We have a few minutes for questions as well. Okay, if anybody has questions to ask us about what we've been doing here, feel free to put them in the chat window or to speak if you can. I don't know if you can.
So so we have got some questions already. Quick one, Istvan says, why did the green voxels change back to red? The answer is that they didn't actually change back to red. Those were new voxels that had been added to the map. So until it's done the next update on the analysis, those are shown as red by default. But then it quite quickly realizes that it does have enough data already to mark them as green. Another question from Steve Walters. So yeah, so this detector, all the detectors that we discussed, they're all looking for gamma. You would actually, so fixed alpha contamination for a lot of isotopes and a lot of different combinations of fingerprints, you could actually use a detector like the GG to detect them by their gamma signature. For the time being, we haven't integrated alpha or beta support into this version of the mobile stack, but it actually is supported by the Recon product stack. So that's something that we can do relatively quickly in the near future. One of the reasons we didn't do alpha in this context is that it's actually not that interesting, because alpha travels such a short distance. It just, you've detected where your detector has been and nothing else. You don't get the same sorts of interesting interactions that you get where with gamma, as you spend a certain amount of time at a certain distance from a place, you're able to mark that place as cleared even though you haven't really been there. And that's actually quite a complex thing to track, but it's something which is very valuable if you're trying to do clearance efficiently. For example, in the security application, you want to do it as quick efficient as possible, and being able to keep track of quantities like that enables you to do that job significantly better and quicker.
I think there's a few more questions there for you, Matt.
Well, yeah, just what was the activity? So the activity of the cesium source, I think, was about 50 megabecquerels. I don't know the exact, it was a nominal 50 megabecquerel source when it was new. The threshold was actually set a bit higher. So the threshold was set for something more like 100, I think. I mean, kind of arbitrary. We knew it was going to find the source because we sort of put it somewhere we knew it was going to go. So do we have an experience with final status survey or clearance? I mean, well, yes and no, not robotically, and obviously final state clearance is a very it's a very sort of structured process. Auditability is very important. We think there's a lot of advantages to trying to do that robotically, but we think there's also a lot of work to be done that's not really just the robotics, but it's also about the process and how you change the process to get advantage from the robots. So I'm 100% sure it's going to go that way in the future, but it's not like you could be doing a final clearance tomorrow using this kind of technique. But what you could be doing is your pre-clearance reassurance survey. It's always very hard to scroll down the list, I'm finding. Is there plans for active deployments? Yes, we've been working with Sellafield on a prospective demo in a beta gamma plant at Sellafield, and we're planning a demonstration in Japan at a LINAC facility. Those are both, so we're kind of waiting to see when we can actually physically do those things, but yeah, we do hope that we'll have a couple of real deployments by the summer, hopefully. Can the robot identify the radionuclide? Yes, it can, as long as the radionuclide is in its library. We didn't show that in this case. This one was cesium-137, which is in the library. It's not always the case that it's in the library, but it will still observe the source. It doesn't need to be able to identify the source to be able to map it thoroughly, as long as its quality objective isn't expressed in terms of becquerels of a specific isotope. So if you do it on source emission rate, for example, it will still behave gracefully even when it can't quite understand what it's seeing. And of course, you're always free to add something. If you do have an exotic isotope that you need to map, you can add that. Well, at least we could add that to its library of radionuclides.